Beautiful.
Lay down the mat. Lay down the mat. Claim the territory. You gotta lay down the mat. Spread out the mat.
Because I've left my. There should be other. Alright, we ready? Do you want me to just jump Good? Not. It's just not. I pronounce it not. Although, do you want me to just have her standing in the back? Yes, that sounds great. That sounds like yes, thank you.
Yeah, let's.
All right. Hey everyone, thank you for your patience. If you could slowly, not awkwardly at all, end your conversations at a natural breaking point. Thank you so much for being here. It is our December liminal event. It is a little earlier than, 1 week earlier than we would have normally done it because of the holidays. There's a whole slew of literary events happening the next 2 weeks. So thank you for being here tonight specifically. We wanted to open tonight with a remembrance of a really important person in the New Orleans literary community. And so while our evening will be jovial and it will be celebratory, we also wanted to ground it in the life and remembrance of this very special person. So Christy Lorio was a writer that many of us knew who passed away earlier this week. There's information about her memorial service on all of her social medias, Twitter, Instagram, and her Facebook, Christy Lorio. And if you want more information about that, you can talk to me afterwards, and I'll be happy to provide you with that information. But specifically, we wanted to open with reading an essay that Christy submitted to us for our anthology that we're working on. We were really lucky that Christy agreed to read at our first Poetry and Pie event last month. It was her last reading that she participated in, and we have it recorded, and it should already be on YouTube actually. It's already on YouTube. But we didn't want to read one of those essays. We wanted to read the essay she submitted to our anthology. She was the first person when we said we were going to start this new project, that we were going to print an anthology from our CWW community. She was the first person that submitted work to us. So we're going to read that essay specifically in remembrance and celebration of the wonderful artist and writer that was Christy Lorio. A pair of finches took up residence in an abandoned nest in my front porch light fixture. We watched them as they made a little home in the sweet olive tree in our front yard. They scoped out a good spot and they began to build trust, not with us, but with our physical space. They tolerate when I sit on the porch with my neighbor most evenings, eavesdropping on conversations from passersby and shaking our fists at drivers going too fast. At first, it was 3 finches claiming space in the tree. The 2 females got into fights, especially if one got too close to the other. If they were humans, I imagined them ripping each other's hair out, cursing at one another and causing a scene. Why are they fighting for the male's attention? They, along with the red-chested male finch, would perch on the power lines and declare our front yard their home. They chased off other birds if they got too close, not unlike our dogs barking at other dogs on their evening walks. As the temperature changed from a mild New Orleans spring to the cusp of an unbearably hot summer, we noticed the finches inching closer and closer to the abandoned nest. The male and 1 female patted the nest with anything they could find, mostly sticks and tired, old cushion batting they plucked from a trash pile. The light fixture is too high for us to peek inside, but we tried anyway. My husband grabbed the ladder so we could get a closer look, but we didn't get so close that we disturbed anything potentially growing inside. It wasn't our space now, it was theirs. We left them alone as we watched and hoped from afar. I pulled out the long lens of my film camera, using it like a pair of binoculars to spy on our potential new neighbors. One morning, Thomas let the dog out, and there were new sounds emanating from above. The eggs had finally hatched, which made us positively giddy. We had just lost our other dog to cancer after months of treatment, including a leg amputation and 6 rounds of chemo. Our hearts were still heavy, and my head was still bald from my own cancer treatment, which has been ongoing for the past 3 years. Mom and Dad guarded the nest, and I imagined, like any new parents, that they were full of hope and fear. Every day the babies got a little bigger and a little stronger. I take delight in the tender caretaking. When Dad feeds them, I can hear the high-pitched chirps they emit from my living room. If I'm lucky enough to be sitting on the front porch while they're being fed, I watch them crane their necks, reminding Dad they are still in need of his care. The fledglings' heads are now covered in feathers, and my hair is starting to catch up to their heads, although I have a long way to go until I have more than a veneer of near-invisible strands covering my scalp. I imagine the babies are approaching the avian equivalent of teenagehood, getting stronger and more independent, but not quite ready to fly. My husband and I don't have kids by choice, just my 2-year-old niece that I'm enamored with. Like watching the mama and papa Finches, we are on the periphery of my niece's upbringing. I taught her how to trigger the shutter button on my camera, snapping a photo that I have yet to develop. I taught her my dogs' names, Izzy and Beignet, while Izzy was still alive. I hope to live long enough to see my niece become a teenager. I hope she loves me as much as I love her. I often joke that when she's old enough to spend summers in New Orleans away from her parents, she'll sneak out of my house and head to a bar, but joke's on her. Aunt Christy is already there 2 drinks in. I'm awaiting the day that the baby finches are big enough to fly. I wonder if they'll hesitate, unsure of themselves, or if they will have the confidence to trust their wings. They'll falter before they succeed, but they'll go on to soar through the neighborhood. Perhaps we'll see them again as adults, ready to use our nest once again. So in honor of Christy, please raise your drink, your glass. Let's dedicate tonight to 3 things that Christy loved more than anything: good drinks, good company, and good words. Thank you for being here. First up tonight, we have Christian Lee. Yeah. I don't think I can properly pinpoint the moment when I met Christian Lee. He just seemed to suddenly appear at local readings, all quiet and watchful and engaged. I mean, like, about it. And that's how I feel about the batch of poetry Christian sent us a sneak peek of the work we'll hear him read tonight. I was so about it. I'm particularly excited to hear Christian read it tonight because the lyricism, the musicality of his work is striking, singular, or, as he writes in Freudian Flash, like mouthing words in drowning waves. Poems addressing topics like gun violence and taking off a pair of cleats are treated with equal attention and care. Also found a pervasive sense of longing, or to quote from After I Play Soccer, love's sorrow, mixed up with clever wordplay, unexpected turns, and sensual language, perhaps what I might even call textural, especially given our conversation a few weeks ago about our shared obsession with fabric right now. So Christian totally asked for consent before checking out my scarf, and in like form, I want to ask you to please make some noise if you are a consensual participant in tonight's performance and are ready for Christian to read us some poetry tonight.
Yeah.
Now for the fun stuff. Christian Lee is a writer born in New Orleans, raised in Baton Rouge. He is a student at the University of New Orleans pursuing an English degree with a concentration in journalism and is expected to obtain his bachelor's degree in December. Fingers crossed. How's that going, Christian? Cool. Yeah! He has always liked poetry but fell in love with it at the beginning of 2020, thanks to an intro to creative writing course at UNO. He particularly likes poetic theory. He adopted a kitten in August. Please welcome to the stage Christian Lee.
an honor to be here with you all tonight. I see lots of familiar faces, and some really great peers, but also really great writers. Matt and for you tonight. Also Caroline, see you over there. So I want to start off with a poem called Freudian Flash. And a bang knocks on wood. Yes, it's water under the bridge. The river was your womb, a forgotten wet dream. A four-letter word, look, a swooping dove. With a thump, a fog-coated memory. A light flicks on, you turn off. Tell me what's hurting you. Miss me with those carnal eyes, mouthing words and drowning waves. Yes, it happens still. Yes, rain check the sunset. Gravity larger than life clings to every hour. Give you This next piece was written 2 years ago in my intro to creative writing class. I'm sorry, I guess I'm not loud enough. Yeah, this is good, right? I think, yeah.
Sorry,
This next piece was written in my intro to creative writing class, so about 2 years ago. I made a few light edits since then, but it's called Revival. Looking at old photographs, I'm reminded of a story that I forgot. Family, feelings, lost to a temporal void. Memories covered in plastic, fermented in ink and worn by time. I'm reminded of a past that never fully reached the present, but at the very least, thank you, Kodak. Madonna and Child, tempura and gold on wood, Duccio. With my body facing up, mouth open, hands cupped as if reciting a prayer, a woman more sentient than me smiles. She's cradling her baby, a little me. She will never forget this moment. Just minutes after my birth, no one can judge me for not remembering. My mother's mother, you were there too, in the birth room. You were just as happy. And whether it was before or after chemo, you kept the same vibrant smile. Skin only just a little bit darker, only a little bit blackened, only a little less meat. Was it the cancer or the chemo? Maybe it was the doctor who didn't realize until you were stage 4. I imagine I was crying that I also wasn't the child of Christ. Somehow, with no affiliations to God, you named me Christian. I must have been conceived as a blessing. I wonder if I live up to that name. I wonder if the christening worked. Just a few feet away from the altar, again, you're holding me. This time, not in a hospital where your muted skin resembles baby blue sheets. This time, you're holding me near windows of stained glass, handing me off to a holy man of God. He's wearing white, so you know he's godly. He's sprinkling my head with water in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. I didn't consent to this, but anyone would appreciate the gesture of being saved from hell. Just minutes after my birth, it's hard to acknowledge that I can't remember. It's hard to imagine I caused you so much pain. It's hard to imagine you were so pale, with joy on your face not adding up. Luckily, there's proof, a photograph. We were crying together, our first bonding moment. Only one of us forgot. Part of me wonders where the memories went. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Oil on canvas. Go again. I want to say I cried a little bit more, slowly forgetting you, unaware of what death meant, but knowing something important was missing. Maybe I sensed your passing from my own mother, like a wave more potent than radiation, or maybe I missed you holding me. In one of the photos, we're napping together long ways across the sofa. My head lay on your chest, and we looked so peaceful. You were always a fair complexion, like a golden hour, stripped with more than a few orange pigments. But here your skin fell to earth, resembling honey, your eyelids roasted caramel, evincing the effects of chemo. I must have been only a few months old then, but compared to your shaved head, I had more hair than you. I may only remember you through photographs, but your blood begot my blood. Your history is one that produced my mother, who then produced me. So, in a way, I may not remember you, but I know of you through her, through something more real than plastic. Our flesh is proof that you existed. These photographs are proof that I smiled, and proof that, while I may not remember if these things happened and if they had some meaning, but I'll never know if you were prettier in person. The way photos compress time into a single moment, I'll never know if the pixels did you justice. You were my mother's mother, yet these memories hardened by photographs are not enough. I can never remember the warmth of when you held me. Reviving memories that don't seem to be mine. But I know the past led up to this point. In my remembering, I want to cherish the flesh that founded me, though I can never remember the warmth that held me. I wonder if my mother misses your warmth too. It's been almost 20 years for both of us, and at this point, I know memory can be both partial and unfair. I can't help but remember if your radiance died along with my memory of you. I know better than to question if the sky is really blue, even though there's only blackness beyond it. We make sense of whatever, despite the oddities which don't make sense. Soft memories hardened like plastic. There must be another way to remember the things we forgot. Yeah, so that was definitely nonfiction. Here's a poem. Probability. What if I told you I love you? Would doves fly forth from my mouth and perch upon your heart? I thought about probability today. As I walked through the rain, the chorus of thunder, the invisible lightning, no doubt etching up the sky. You know the odds of being struck by lightning are 1 to 1 million. But when you're struck by lightning, wouldn't the odds be 1 to 1? You know, aside from the flesh on your back, you resemble rain. The way your touch seeps beneath my clothes into the blades of my shoulders. Thou shalt not be defeated by the rain, by the cow, by the boy. Probability is pretty funny, but then again, I'm not the best at math. One second, you guys. There was an important piece of context I forgot. Okay, yeah. So this was partly inspired by just like walking in the rain, right? But then one of the lines, "Be not defeated by the rain," came from Kenji Miyazawa. In one of his poems, he says, "Be not defeated by the rain, nor let the wind prove you're better. Succumb not to the snows of winter, nor be bested by the heat of summer." That was the context that I forgot to mention. Himbo me, please. Himbo me, please. Observe the exhaust in my eyes after telling me he's straight. Inquire about the night before, our lips locking pipe beneath a wide open 4 a.m. sky. Not a star in sight. When will I see you again? My reply, gone. With the wind, of course. Gone to another boy, this boy a man. 40s, well-groomed, ex-military, miniature chihuahua. Yes, they exist. A hottie committed to being unaware that he gets it, you don't. Tan and aggressively lonely from all the looks he says he hates, attention, eyes from the bar constellate, elevating him. A new planetary obsession, simple attire, wife beater, joggers, muscles, print. It's the little things. Don't be a stranger, he says. I forgot that something people say. This next poem is motivated by my will to not go to work. To Veronica, subject line, re-work today. Veronica, hi, I won't be coming in today. The weather has been unkind. The weather has had an unkind effect on me. I would prefer to be in bed or at the lake. The autumn breeze is quite nice. The sky is overcast, peculiar blue. The waves, I imagine, are causing quite a ruckus today. I imagine the day would be better spent in nature than under those bleak and pointy fluorescent lights. I imagine I'd prefer to write a poem. I'd rather review all the little details of my life under a setting sun, under gray, melancholy blue clouds. I prefer people watching instead of speaking with them today. I prefer to fly away with the autumn breeze like a bird. What do you call those things down at Pontchartrain Lake? Pelicans, seagulls? I prefer to crash against rocks like the brown muddy waves. I prefer to soak in the aura of life. Of course, I prefer to get paid, but simply not getting fired would work too. I realize I'm emailing you 3 minutes before my shift begins, but I spent a few moments thinking of all the things I could be doing aside from work. I imagine we all do the same. About half an hour ago, the weather gently caressed my being. It was quite a show, though I don't know if it registered upon my face. I was simply moved to tears. But perhaps it was my allergies. The wind carried with it nostalgia, a remembrance of what I'm unsure. It touched me in all the wrong ways, worse, but more effective than any keto diet I've ever tried. I felt 20 pounds lighter, as if the wind swept the earthly presence of gravity away. Utterly embraced by cold winds, nothing else reminds me of mortality in such a delicate and somber, omnidirectional way. Well, aside from Janet's cold disposition at work, I do hope the doctors are able to give her a new knee, and maybe a lobotomy. On days like this, I just get a little emotional, a little unlike myself. I believe it best the patrons do not see me this way. Did you know that without skyscrapers, the skyline could just gobble you whole? I'd imagine Mrs. Pontellier felt the same way about her water as I do my overcast sky. Well, gobbled I was. It certainly wasn't consensual. In fact, I'm sure we've all encountered that uninvited pesky guest called weather. I hope this is not any inconvenience. And whether I'll be coming in tomorrow, oh heaven only knows. I'm unsure of how long the weather will be unkind, but I believe it will certainly be unkind tomorrow. I willed myself for the unkindness. Today, well, I was just caught by surprise. And well, I hear the flying fish here are quite a stare, hopping and skipping about, the crashing of waves being a sort of paradise for them. I find myself a little envious. Isn't it a little ironic to be envious of a fish? A flying fish to boot? But anyhow, I hear this is the best of all possible worlds, so it's possible everything is as it should be. Do get back to me when you get a chance. I just thought it a shame if I would have missed the conclusion of this gorgeous lilac rouge sunset. Work will be here tomorrow, and tomorrow after that, and forever hence. Did you know work will always exist? Isn't that just lovely? At one point, I imagined myself a seamstress or an architect. architect. But I think I'll enjoy the lake. I do think you'll find my decision to be most rational. This particular sunset would only exist for a short while. Whether I go to bed or to the lake, both would be better than work. I think you'll agree. The men are out sailing their boats, navigating the waters in quite a youthful fashion. I passed by them on my way here half an hour ago. It was quite the sight. Enjoy your day in your office. Sincerely. This next poem is called Shock and Awe. This was also something I wrote like 2 years ago, but it has kind of been something that I really haven't come to terms with or peace with. It was previously called so this piece is called Shock and Awe. It was originally titled Shock and Meditation. Shock and Awe is it's sort of I just brain farted. So shock and awe is a military strategy. Usually in any bombing or it's basically just overwhelming offense. It was done for Hiroshima, for Nagasaki. Even 9/11 could also be considered as like a display of shock. It's just a tactic used by the military to disarm the enemy, basically. And so the reason I titled it Shock and Meditation is because there was just lots of violence that was going on that I couldn't really wrap my head around, and I didn't really see myself as like having the language to sort of like communicate that. And so when I retitled this Shock and Awe, I'm kind of like, I don't know, claiming that I'm ready. But anyway, here it goes. Shock and Awe. Feeling like 10 dead dogs. Blew this, blew that. Little black boy, like a moth, floats to the flash of a bullet. His flesh, charged a crime. His mother, worried sick. His grades, his livelihood, his skin. No serrated edge to cut through the narrative, crushed like windpipe. Gunmetal blue, red, white. Each zooming car, dogged, detonating glints, his essence a soundscape for violence. Pixelated faces, names etched holographic pretty across headlines. Kids kick buckets. Kids. We'll be kids. We'll be kids. Until they're dead. The hills are alive. The block is hot. It's the sounds of bang. Blue blues brains out. My cup runneth over, shot like a thief in the night. So just have like this poem and then another one. After I play soccer. On arriving home, I begin with the unsheathing of my cleats, their tongues engraved in German letters that spell love sorrow. Then the unslipping of my socks, the meshing of my toes against old linoleum floors. I slither to the bathroom door, glance at the ground on my face. A plush pop as I drop my shorts, a bouquet of flowers kissing the feet of sows unwed. A steaming teapot as I turn the knob of a rusty faucet, a simple gesture, a mechanical device, showers me in love. I find joy, rinse, repeat. This next poem, yeah, so this is my last poem. It was a little bit, I guess it was just inspired by my grandma. She raised me and she's always like asking me to like help around the house. And so this is called The Masculine Urge. Every step embodies ruckus, that loud, aggravated, anxious gait, the hunchback, twisted visage, simply outlandish, the quality of trash that spews from her mouth, cicada sky. The poor phoenix refuses to rise from its ashes. The hour halts as this big bone giant makes its entrance. Can I get some help around here? Misogyny, maybe. But this woman is too busy to be human. On this day, we honor the masculine urge to be useless.
Give it up one more time for Christian. That was wonderful. I've never felt that soccer was sexy until that moment. All right. Quick, very cool. All right. Next up, we have Elizabeth Miki Brina. So the first time, yeah, do that. Love it. So the first time I met Liz, I did not know that I had met Liz. We were both rushing to make copies in the UNO English copy room. I was making copies of my thesis notes as my defense was happening. Not an exaggeration. 5 minutes from that moment, Liz was picking up copies for a class that I assume was also happening 5 minutes from that moment. And while we wrestled the stubborn machines and danced around each other, she never asserted authority or demanded my grad school ass move out of the way. Later that night, Michelle and I hosted Gold Room, and Liz walked in, and someone pointed her out to me. They said, "That's Liz Brina. She wrote a whole book, and Knopf published it. That's like winning the Super Bowl of writing." And all I could think was, holy fucking shit, I totally fucked up her copies earlier. But that's who Elizabeth Miki Brina is. She'll never assert her authority over a punk-ass procrastinating grad student, or wave her beautiful book around like a diva. She's all talent, no ego. Over the last 6 months or so, I've had the immense pleasure of hearing Liz read her work on multiple occasions. Her essays are charming, funny, searing, and vulnerable. Hearing and reading her work makes me want to drop everything and just sit down and write. And what greater compliment is there to a writer than to know their work moves others to create? And what greater honor than to know you were moved to creation because of Elizabeth Miki Brina?
Elizabeth Miki Brina is the author of Speak Okinawa, a memoir published by Knopf in February of 2021 and one of NPR's best books of the year. Her work has also appeared in The Sun, River Teeth, Literary Hub, Gulf Coast, and Hyphen Magazine, among others. Everybody, give her a welcome.
That was really, really nice. Thank you so much. So good. Wow. I can't see anything. Christian, that was fantastic. Like total pro. Yeah, I'm reading. This is very new, very raw, and I'm pretty scared. And I remember, I remember something Neil said about submitting to workshop, how you should submit things that scare you, right? That means you're doing something right. Does that sound like something you said? So I try to apply that principle to readings, choosing what I read. So here goes. Thank you so much for listening. It's called December 1st, 2020. I had to climb over the railing of my porch. I had to jump over a bed of Purple Heart 3 feet to the ground. I had to run 2 blocks to the gas station. I had to climb and jump because he obstructed the proper exit, stood astride on the steps, leaned to the right and to the left as I tried to pass. I had to run because he wouldn't leave my house, and I was afraid that if I stayed at my house without letting him come inside my house, he would bang on the door and bang on the windows, and the thuds of his fists would sound so threatening, and the fear would get the best of me, and I would call the police, and one of us would go to jail again. That was how the day started. Around midnight, when the gas station used to be open, when we used to be able to buy a pint of whiskey, a pack of cigarettes, a carton of fried chicken, a paper bag of meat pie, as late or as early as we wanted, a safe haven. That was 2 years ago. Ever since Ida, it closes at 10. If it wasn't open, I don't know where I would have gone, what I would have done differently. I wouldn't have been sitting on the curb of the parking lot, cradling and swigging from a bottle of wine, sobbing and wailing. He paced and hovered, sighing and rolling his eyes at my tantrum, my presumed performance. Please, he said, bouncing and shivering, I'm cold. I don't care if you're cold. Neither of us were wearing coats. If someone else had been watching, and maybe someone else had been watching, that was essentially my whole purpose for retreating to the nearest public place, maybe it would have seemed like 2 harmlessly dysfunctional lovers having a typical quarrel. Maybe I would have seemed like the hysterical one, the irrational one. That was how I seemed to myself for the worst part of 2 years. Each of us has a date, a significant date, a peculiar date, distinct from the rest and completely our own, paradigm-usurping occurrences that we will always remember, always revisit and relive. December 1st, 2020, it's mine. It marks the beginning of the end of my most volatile and shattering relationship. It also marks the beginning of the end of a year that belongs to all of us. December 1st, 2020. Do you remember precisely where you were, what you were doing? Does the mere announcement of the date conjure specifics? Despite the pervasive blur, does the collective trauma of that entire year make the days within it more memorable? According to Susan Engel, a renowned developmental psychologist and extensive researcher of memory, there's a major difference between how we encode and recall usual experiences and how we encode and recall unusual experiences. The usual tends to recede while the unusual tends to linger and stick to the forefront. The unusual is how an order emerges amidst the mush and monotony, the vague and elusive. The unusual is how we construct narratives, a sense of before, during, and after. Maybe I remember so many vivid details of this particular day because this particular day happens to be the day when a former unusual that had become usual abruptly transitioned to a new unusual that would become usual, the next phase. I remember walking home from the gas station, still sobbing, still wailing, but too tired to beg and resist. He followed me home, but too tired to refuse and remain. After all that, just like that, he just left. I remember the text in the morning. Good morning, I love you. I hope you got some rest. Are you awake, babe? At 11:24, 11:26, 11:37, and 11:40 a.m., the exact times I verified by scrolling back 2 years on my phone. I lied to him. I just woke up. I told him the truth. I have a terrible headache. He called and I answered. He asked, how much did you drink last night? As if he didn't know. I answered, half a bottle of wine, as if he didn't drink the other half. He said, you must be dehydrated, as if half a bottle of wine was in a night out from drinking alcohol. He suggested I chug a glass of water and asked, can I bring you a Gatorade, as if offering a solution, a chance to make amends. I blurted, you scare me. He said, I'm sorry I scare you, but you keep breaking up with me and it's driving me crazy. I couldn't tolerate the qualified apology, the deflection of blame, the reversal of causality that I tried and tried to explain again and again with hours and hours of arguments and discussions and appeasements and promises. No, I keep breaking up with you because you scare me. No, I keep breaking up with you because you're already crazy. Right then, I didn't say that. Instead, I screamed and hung up the phone. He called and I pressed decline. He called and I pressed decline. He called and I answered and I screamed. A single, elongated, chest-stiffening, throat-smearing scream. Was this type of interaction unusual? At first, yes. But the temperature kept rising, the spectrum kept expanding and allowing for increased extreme exposures. I'd become adjusted, accustomed to the heat. I hoped for relief when he was eventually arrested for the fourth and final time, when I decided to block his number and rent a car and drive 1,000 miles to maintain a barrier of distance for a month. Except the fear was replaced by an even more tremendous guilt and regret I didn't anticipate. For the worst part of 2 years, I remember the text in the morning, a subsequent conversation, wishing I had texted, "Good morning, and I love you too," instead of, "I just woke up." Wishing I had said, "Yes, please, bring me some Gatorade, and let's make pancakes and bacon for breakfast," instead of, "You scare me." I remember he called and called and called, and I pressed decline and pressed decline and pressed decline, wishing I could have erased my memory, forgotten every previous instance of unleashed vitriol. "You're a liar and cheater, and you'll always be a liar and cheater, you selfish bitch, you psycho bitch." Forgotten that the night before he had spewed these words as he grabbed my face, clenched my cheeks with his palms and my temples with his fingertips. I remember how I answered every fourth or fifth or 10th call with another scream, wishing I could have answered as a blank slate, shown enough mercy to take and absorb each blow, blow after blow, and respond with a softness in my voice that would disarm and heal him. According to Susan Engel, the expert on memory, memories aren't recorded and archived as intact clips and images. Memories aren't formed in the past, in the moment we're experiencing. Memories are formed in the present, in the moment we're remembering. Memory is determined by who we are when we're remembering. There are different versions of ourselves, therefore there are different versions of our memories. Maybe a different version doesn't necessarily indicate a change of content. Maybe a change of perspective, a change of interpretation. I remember and rehearsed the same details, but the vantage shifts, the ankle tilts. My mother called. She told me my father was tracking my incoming and outgoing texts and calls, and finally called him to intervene. She told me she asked him not to text or call me until I finished my shift at work, and he agreed. She told me my father intended to call him throughout the day to distract him and make sure he agreed. The best they could do from afar, 1,000 miles afar. In earlier versions, I hurled the chain of blame at them, shackled them for being too overprotective, too overbearing, catastrophizing, and turning me against him. In earlier versions, I wish they had minded their own business. After I finished my shift, after 5 hours of lecturing to pitch back squares with white names, bolding and underlining examples of thesis statements and topic sentences, preparing students to write their final papers, worrying about him stewing in his aimlessness, I called and thanked him for complying. I thanked him for waiting. In earlier versions, I appreciated his patience and valiance. In earlier versions, I wished I would have been more concerted about reinforcing such behavior. Can I come over? Not yet. I was too afraid to say not tonight. I was too afraid to say not tomorrow either. I told him I wanted to ride my bike to the lake, a daily ritual he and I usually enjoy together. I told him I wanted to ride my bike to the lake without him. Is that okay? It wasn't okay, but it was permissible, so I stayed on the phone with him for the first mile, balancing the phone between my ear and my shoulder, steering with one hand, bracing for potholes. I rode fast and hard, lungs and thighs burning, breath and sweat releasing. This is what I need. This is what we both need. One more day, 2 days, 1 week, 2 weeks, time to reflect, time to process, time to let the nerves settle. In earlier versions, I admitted I was planning my escape and scorned my cowardice. In earlier versions, I wished I would have let him ride with me. At the lake, I took a picture of the darkening sky, a hint of color on the horizon. I sent it to him to prove he was still with me, or rather I was still with him, faithful. He called and I answered. Are you with someone? No. Are you meeting someone? No. Can I come over when you get home? No. You must be with someone. I'm not, no. Then why can't I come over? I screamed and hung up the phone. He called and called and called. I pressed decline, I pressed decline, I pressed decline. You knew that ignoring me would hurt me. You knew what I would do. This is what he would tell me weeks, months, a year and a half later, sporadically, intermittently, after weeks and months of no contact. I couldn't deny it. I accepted full responsibility. That was an earlier version. Now I wish I had said, so what if I knew? When I returned home, he was sitting on my porch. I didn't speak to him. I didn't look at him. I locked my bike to the railing. I unlocked and opened the door. He stood to follow. No. I closed and locked the door. I poured a cup of wine. I packed a bag with the rest of the bottle of wine, scarf, hat, gloves, mask, wallet, keys, phone. I brought my provisions to the porch. I closed and locked the door. What's in the cup? Wine. Can I have some? No. Why do you have a bag with you? I was afraid to say I have a bag with me because I'm scared. I was afraid to say I have a bag with me because I might have to spend the night at the gas station. Where are you going? Who are you meeting? Seriously, what's wrong with you? Who are you meeting? No one. Fucking no one. You're fucking pathetic. In earlier versions, I was appalled by my total lack of compassion for his very real illness that warped his mind, controlled his judgment, afflicted his deduction with terrible paranoia and outrageous notions that couldn't be contested or corrected by counter-argument. In earlier versions, I wasn't quite disposed to consider my very real illness, being so sick of all the incessant interrogations, all the answers that wouldn't satisfy, all the answers that morphed into false confessions. I will always wish I had said something gentle and generous, something that would have granted me a clearer conscience. He lowered his head and wept, but goddamn, I couldn't stop. I thought I had won. I thought I had diminished him. I unlocked and opened the door. I don't want to see or speak to you for a long time. I hope you take this time to do some soul searching. Okay, soul searching isn't my finest selection of terms. Did I think such a lame and condescending phrase would suddenly persuade and inspire him? Did I think that his head lowered and bobbing from weeping was the apt condition for him to observe my moral superiority? I still wonder why I hope you take this time to do some soul searching and not "you're fucking pathetic" were the words that riled him. I tried to rush inside. I tried to close and lock the door, but he pounced, lunged, ripped the door from my grasp. He pushed me through the doorway. Okay, push is an exaggeration. Push isn't accurate because there wasn't any impact. I didn't stand firm. I stepped backward as he stepped forward. He grabbed my shoulders and shook. What about you, huh? What about you? Are you gonna do some soul searching? As he shook, I managed to raise the cup of wine to my lips. I sipped. He raised his arm as if cranking. He flashed his palm as if aiming. I held my breath. He swung his arm and smacked the cup. The cup tipped and wine spilled on my couch. The cup tipped and wine spilled on my couch. Pretty anticlimactic. In earlier versions, he didn't shake too hard. No injury, no pain, no warning, panic, or harsh consequence. In earlier versions, I raised the cup of wine to my lips and sipped as a display of apathy, a taunt. I taunted him. You did much worse to me. You were actually violent. This is what he would tell me weeks, months, a year and a half later, referring to the time I slapped him, the time I kicked him, the time I bit his arm, bright purple indents in the shape of my teeth on his arm. Does the context matter? Should I even bother to mention that he stole my phone, waved my phone above his head, too high for me to reach? So I jumped, dangled, used the weight of my body to pull his arm in my mouth. Should I even bother to mention the time he cracked the window with his fist, the time he smashed the window with his fist, the time he threw lit cigarettes at me and the burning embers bounced off of me onto the pavement? Weren't these offenses actually equally violent? Is he more culpable because he's a man, because he's 9 inches taller, 50 pounds heavier, with arms like thick branches that could lift me by my ass, pin me against a wall, toss me onto a bed, flip me onto my stomach? Because once, as a joke, as a game, I asked him to press me down, hold me down, and I broke a sweat struggling to break free, both of us laughing and squealing at the sheer physical impossibility. Is he more approachable because his size and strength contain unfair advantage? Does that make my assaults less egregious? I still want to say no. I still want to say the fact that I'm a woman is an excuse, the fact that I'm smaller and weaker is an excuse. I still don't wish to engage in a tallying of transgressions. I just want to get the story straight. I just want to get my story straight. He would tell me I was his first. The rage he exhibited was unprecedented, the rage that felt like electrocution, like voice and limbs shocked and forced by charged wires and prods. I believed him, because he was my first. For the worst part of 2 years, I would remember the door ripped from my grasp, the push, which wasn't exactly a push through the doorway, the grab and shake of my shoulders, the cramp of his arm, the smack of the cup, wishing I could separate him from these deeds, wishing I could attribute these deeds to the culmination of a defective combination, the result of misaligned damages and star-crossed triggers compounded by freak variables and extenuating circumstances that was the nightmare of the year of 2020. I would remember I fetched baking soda and a wet towel to douse and stroke the stain, wishing I had paused to look at him, spread my arms like wings, and welcomed him to collapse into them. I would remember he followed me from the living room to the kitchen, from the kitchen to the living room, screaming, "That's all you fucking care about? The fucking stain on the couch?" Wishing I had said, "I know, baby. It's okay, baby. It's neither of our faults." Susan Engel claims that what we remember often depends on why we remember. We remember to seek an explanation, justify a current understanding of ourselves. We connect the dots and create a line, the story of who we are, who we think we are, and how we came to be. Only recently I realized that for the worst part of 2 years, the reason I was remembering, constantly revisiting and reliving this day, was to punish myself and protect him. We tell ourselves stories in order to live, one of my favorite quotes by Joan Didion. I'm adding to the statement, making what's implied more explicit. We tell ourselves stories in order for us to live with ourselves. Only recently I realized that for the worst part of 2 years, I wasn't telling my story, I was telling his story in order for him to live with himself. While he and I were together during peaks of cruelty and despair, I would focus on the future, reassured that as soon as I resolved to end the relationship, rid him from my life for good, the torment would vanish with its source. Of course, there'd be a period of missing and mourning. Of course, there would be a steep path to recovery, but I hadn't the faintest notion of how thoroughly he possessed me. All the suspicion and surveillance, all the scrutiny and accusation, all the degrading and berating, all the tiptoeing, circumventing, looking both ways twice, trapped beneath his lens, his gaze had hijacked my point of view. My mother called. She called and I didn't answer. She called and he didn't answer. But his movements caused his pockets to swipe buttons. My mother was listening. I can't attest to what she heard, but relative to the loudest and most vicious of fights, this fight just sounded fairly mild. We're done now. Please don't do this. Please don't end this. We're destroying each other. We'll get better. We won't. No, please don't. You're going to hurt me. I promise I won't. I know it. I feel it. In earlier versions, I was being too hasty, too uncompromising. In earlier versions, the risk would have been worth the reward. He knelt behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist, and kissed my neck. Please don't do this. Please don't end this. I wasn't thinking, just speaking automatically, survival mode, flight instinct. We have to end this right now. I still wish we could have had a better ending. I scrubbed and removed the stain. I checked my phone. My mother was calling again. She was crying when she told me what she heard. She was crying when she told my father to call the police. In earlier versions, I was furious. In earlier versions, they ruined the better ending. You wanted me to get arrested. That's why you told the truth. I must avoid examining his assumption that I should have lied for him, his priority of resentment for telling the truth over remorse for committing the truth. The pathology is still too twisted for me to unravel. I would tell him honestly, with utmost conviction, that I told the police the truth because I believed the truth was harmless. When he fled the scene and the officers arrived with their stock of questions, I believed he did nothing wrong, had nothing to hide. Couples have quarrels, overprotective, overbearing parents overreact. I summoned Chris Rock's stand-up comedy bit. I would never hit a woman, crowd cheers, but I would shake the shit out of her, crowd laughs. Funny, right? I demonstrated. I reenacted the grabbing and shaking, the cranking, the smacking, and told the officers the cup tipped and wine spilled on my couch. I expected laughter. A few hours later, after he was arrested, he called me from jail every 2, 3, 10 minutes, pleading, please don't do this, please don't end this. And when I wouldn't tell him what he wanted to hear because I didn't want to lie to him, he shouted, fucking bitch, you sent me to jail for nothing. A few months later, after I testified in court, after I appealed to the judge to drop the charges, I texted him to tell him the good news, and he texted back, it only took you 5 months after sending me to jail for nothing. Part of me concurred. Yes, you're right, nothing. But another part of me that kept breaking up with him, part of me that spoke automatically as I was scrubbing the stain on my couch, asked myself, nothing? In her book, In the Dream House, in a one-line chapter, Carmen Maria Machado declares, most types of domestic abuse are completely legal. Although I still have qualms with police intervention in general and how ineptly the criminal justice system deals with intimate partner violence, in this moment, in this latest version, I feel a certain amount of vindication. At least for this incident, there was an external party privy to the truth, eager to classify and condemn his actions. For everything else, there was only me, and I was unreliable. Initially, I refused to give his name and address. One of the officers alleged that I was interfering with an investigation, and when I burst into sobs and wails, he quickly recanted. You're not in trouble. You're the victim. Victim. The label was a small comfort. The officers drove away in their big trucks, and I called him to warn him. He didn't answer. I called, and he didn't answer. I rode my bike to his house, afraid to knock on the door, then back to my house, then back to his house, weaving through side streets, calling and calling. He answered and told me he had slit his wrist and was bleeding to death and was going to make me listen to him die because it was all my fault. I hung up the phone. I called the police, gave the police his name and address. I rode my bike to his neighbor's house, gave his neighbor a spare key. He told his neighbor to please hurry, he needs help. That was how the day ended, around midnight, at home, alone, waiting. In every version, including this latest version, I abandoned him. In every version, including this latest version, he is drowning and I am swimming to shore. He is tied to a tree, smothered in gasoline, at the edge of a forest fire, and I'm praying for rain, buckled in the seat of a helicopter. Doesn't matter that he lied about slitting his wrist. Doesn't matter that he never apologized for lying about slitting his wrist. Maybe these memories recur and recur, stay so close to the present, because I still need to find the right explanation, the right story in order for me to live with myself, because I still need to extract him. I've taken nearly 2 years, and I'm gradually, painstakingly, resuming my sight, regaining my line of vision. The story continues.
Give it up one more time for Elizabeth Miki Brina. Thank you for sharing that
It is my absolute pleasure to introduce Neil, aka M.O. Walsh, as our final reader tonight. I hope you are ready to be entertained. No, really, I can think of no better word to describe Neil and his work. We met years ago when I was studying at the University of New Orleans, where he serves as the director of the Creative Writing Workshop. Neil's attitude, his writing, his intros and readings are not to be topped, so I'm not even going to try. They are characterized by lightheartedness and camaraderie, humor, insight, kindness, and inclusivity. Whether making new connections happen at the annual CWW Yacht Club party, throwing a huge event at his place for the Greek festival each year, or simply having his door open at his office all of the time. Neil is truly entertaining in that classic Greek sense. When recruiting new writers to New Orleans, he emphasizes how much we are like a big family here, and that is no lie. Neil, as the director of the CWW, is a leader in creating that climate, and I just want to recognize and acknowledge how fundamental that climate was in our prior work, hosting the Goldroom Reading Series, which was also an honor to be allowed to do that, and how that influence continues to be fundamental in Neil's vision and mission. Thank you, Neil. So we are, thank you. Yeah. So we are super excited both to entertain you tonight and to be so graciously entertained by you.
M.O. Walsh, aka Big Daddy Neil, is the author of 3 books. His first book, a story collection titled The Prospect of Magic, won the Tart's First Fiction Prize. His first novel, My Sunshine Away, was a New York Times bestseller and won the Pat Conroy Award for Southern Fiction. His latest novel, The Big Door Prize, was a finalist for the Thurber Award for American Humor and will premiere next year as a 30-minute comedy series on Apple TV. Starring Chris O'Dowd and adapted by Emmy-winning writer-producer David West Reed from Schitt's Creek. His fiction and essays have appeared in the Paris Review, Southern Review, Garden and Gun, The Guardian, New York Times, and others. He lives in New Orleans with his wife and family, where he directs the Creative Writing Workshop MFA program at the University of New Orleans. Give it up for Emma Walsh.
Adjust this. You know how I do this?
Yes. There it is, yep.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. You can't see anybody up here. First of all, thanks to Christian. That was amazing. Congratulations. Yeah, it's huge, bright future.
Yeah.
Christian, that's awesome. Great work. And then, to Liz, if y'all don't know, you just heard from one of the best nonfiction writers in the country just now. Liz is unbelievable. If you've not read her memoir, please do. Speak of Okinawa. It's unbelievable. New Orleans, University of New Orleans is very lucky to have her.
Yes.
If anyone's ever interested in coming to study with us, come because of her. We're very lucky to have her. And thanks for having me here. I appreciate it. Nikki and Michelle, y'all done such great work. Very honored to know you and be here. I was so glad of what you said about Christy Lorio earlier. I'm going to read a nonfiction piece because I was going to try and do something for Christy. People that don't know her, you can't go back in time and do anything. But she was really a remarkable person that really touched a lot of people. And the one thing you could do is go buy her book that just came out
Yes.
in November called Cold Comfort by Christy Lorio. Please do that. I'm going to read two pieces, short pieces. Like I said, the first one's nonfiction. And this is, I know I'm not very good at nonfiction because, like, after you, I recognize one thing I'm doing wrong. First of all, I'm so sorry that this is happening. I mean, how do y'all hear this stuff and not just hurt? You know, unbelievable. But anyway, I tend to write about things that were like really good in my life instead of bad. So I recognize I'm probably approaching it from the wrong angle to start with. But I'm going to read two pieces, and they both have to do with the natural world, which I'm from Louisiana, and you know things like water are important to me. I think you'll see the first one's going to be nonfiction, the second one's going to be fiction, and see maybe the difference of what's going on. But anyway, so this first piece is a nonfiction essay called "In the Lightning Past." Anyway, if anything is funny, you can laugh. I'm not upset. Like, so it's not, you know, some people are like, oh, we gotta be really quiet. I'm not that way. And if it sucks, just boo. Okay, it's called "In the Lightning Past." All the biggest fish saw us, and they were not impressed. Who could blame them? We thought we were smart, my buddy Brock and me. A couple of writers in grad school skipping class to fish a place called Spring Lake. It sat along Highway 7 off a pale stretch of road between Oxford and Holly Springs, and it seemed nobody fished it but us. This was North Mississippi, circa 2004. I was near 30, still rocking a full head of hair, and just married. Yeah, see, that's funny. Mean is what that is. My buddy Brock was younger, maybe 25, but had already been married for a fifth of his life, and therefore looked as old as me in his way. We had our tackle and our poles and our beer in my boat, and had each hauled in enough fish in our day to have stories, to have techniques, but we had never seen this. Look at him, Brock said, thumped a can of skull with his finger, just staring at us. Two big largemouth bass, hog legs we like to call them, sat floating beside our boat in plain sight. They were maybe a foot deep in the water and hovered next to a tangle of roots, both facing the same way as if expecting a bus. They looked close enough to shake hands with, and their exhibitionism unnerved us. Based on our previous experience at Spring Lake, which we'd fished nearly twice a week that past year, this felt to us like spotting a couple of yetis. I cast out a jig to see what would happen. It sank as quiet and quick as a dream, but the problem was that we could see it, just as clearly as we could see the fish we were trying to catch. Nothing had ever looked as artificial to me as my bait in that moment. The black metal head, gray wire skirt, green rubber tail, the red hook. It resembled neither the living nor the dead. I might as well have dropped in a radio. My cast missed the larger one by less than an inch, but neither fish bothered to move. No strike of hunger, no strike in self-defense, no flash of color as they hightailed for cover. They instead seemed preoccupied, almost philosophical, as if above this entire charade. Well, I said, this is atypical. On the map of our lives, we met in the middle, me and Brock. I'm from South Louisiana, he's from East Tennessee, so we were somewhat equidistant from home there in North Mississippi. Since our schoolmates were from places like Philly and New York, Brock and I bonded over our collective southernness, if that is a word. Yet we still had our differences. I was raised Catholic, and he was raised Baptist. I was more swamp pop, he was more country. What this meant is that I would say, come on, man, let's have another drink, let's get tooted. And he would check his phone to see if his wife had texted him to go home and let out the dog or mow the lawn, and then say, nah, I probably shouldn't, but then have 6 more. All to say that we took different routes to the same destination, and we understood each other well. We were friends. Speaking of, I reeled in my line as Brock changed his lure. I don't know, buddy, he said. This might be a long day. I cast again. Maybe if I can just hit one in the mouth, I said. He'll just sort of breathe it in. To understand my frustration with this water, you should know that where I grew up, you don't see what you've caught until it's landed. If you're in the salt or the marsh or the gulf, the water is so often dark and choppy and large, you can pull up any number of surprises. A speck or a red or a flounder, maybe even a turtle. You could pull up something ancient with teeth that you'd still gut and fry if the size was right. Even in our rivers and lakes, the water is silted to the color of chocolate milk, and you can't see what goes on down there. You likely don't want to know. Brock was used to clearer waters in Tennessee, sure, water you might even be tempted to drink, but rushing by him so fast in the creeks and streams that he'd waded, casting flies to land fish so handsome and sleek he couldn't help but release them, that this still water clarity was new to him too. His were the kind of fish you pull from swirls and take pictures of, not for their weight or ferocity, but for the way the sunlight glints off their skin like a prism, for the way they already look like a picture. We'd fished the Bass and Spring Lake plenty that year, putting around every inch of it in my John boat, trolling across the big blank slate of its middle, pushing ourselves through clusters of cypress and mangroves that edge its banks. We'd run buzzbaits and flukes and poppers. We'd drop worms and jigs and more jigs. We'd rig Texas and Carolina and had what felt to us like plans for every occasion. But the lake appeared transformed to us since we had last come across it. It had been purified in some way, and so we poked around our brains for the reasons. Had there been rain lately? There had, we remembered, pouring rain. Maybe that was it, enough rain to turn this lake into a bath. Brock stood up and took in the scene. "Look over there," he said, and nodded toward a circle of trees ahead. 3 more, he told me, hog legs too. I clicked on the small motor as Brock cast about, and I looked down into the lake as we trolled. I could see the bottom as clear as I could see my own hands. Every once in a while, though, I noticed a strange thing. A sliver of gold, it looked like. A toothpick set atop the gray dirt of the lake floor. I saw one and then another. I checked the other side of the boat and saw the same thing, 5 or 6 of them, easy, some as long as a pencil, all of them sharpened to points and facing the same direction. "Are you seeing this?" Brock asked me. I clicked off the motor and stood, figuring maybe his line had got snagged in a tree, but he had stopped casting altogether. In front of us now, a field of golden slivers. They were uniform in their arrangement, as if the outward rays of a sunken sun that we could not see. And the closer we got to the stand of cypress ahead, the denser they became. We passed fish standing so still below us, I could see the easy work of their gills. "What the hell are they?" Brock said. And I knew what it was that he wanted. We were no longer looking for fish. I sat back at the motor and made it hum slow. We coasted like hunters over the new landscape beneath us, the brightening bottom of the lake bed, and found a path into a cluster of trees. "God, man," Brock said, and we saw it. In the middle of a circle of trees, a cypress so gold as to dull all the colors around it. The top had been shorn off completely, relieved of its limb and bark, and the remaining trunk stood as proud as a sword. At its base, the water as clear as no glass. "Lightning," Brock said, and the probable past unfolded. In the night, perhaps, sometime that we were not looking, that we were not there, an explosion so powerful to have killed anything that was. All of those golden slivers we now knew were not slivers, but splinters, arrows, darts that would have shot into our bodies like needles. The power of it, the awful beauty. We did not speak for a time, and we did not fish. Instead, we looked into the neighboring trees where huge golden limbs sat snagged in their branches. Wood as large as human legs hung tangled above us, all glowing and undeniably new. We became amateur sleuths in our heads, wondering how long ago it could have happened, what it would have felt like to be there in the moment it did, and how widespread the damage could have been. We took the boat out of the trees and trolled circles around the point of impact. "Another one over there," I said, and here, and the last one we saw finally more than 100 yards away from the strike. We traded scientific theories, me and Brock, our poles planked between the seats of the boat. What sort of velocity were we dealing with? What frightening speed? And then a strange notion that we had both heard in school long ago about how lightning actually starts on the ground. It is some sort of disagreement between positive and negative energy, we remembered, recognized by a passing storm, and then corrected without discussion. But we had seen, we both knew, was the place where lightning began. When I think back about this now, and the way we acted for the rest of that day, I wonder if the ghost of those needles got in us. We left the lake and loaded the boat and took off down the road as if high. We guzzled beers and called up friends and retold the story to ourselves again and again. We went to the store and bought more beer, a bottle of bourbon, and thick as your fist steaks. We were going back to Brock's to eat well, by God, to drink heartily, to let out the dog, and to pet him like we hadn't seen him in months. We were never going to sleep. And then the years went by, and Brock would find out about another man in his wife's life, and would go on to find another love, and then another after that. And our professors would die or become famous, and our friends would write books and enter rehab and either birth or miscarry children. And I would go on to raise my own children and find myself in a hospital with my wife, as the doctor asked if she can feel what she is doing on her left side as strongly as what he is doing on her right, and the answer she gives me with only a look will blow me to bits. And I will be reminded of those golden splinters. The power, the awful beauty, the phrase itself, the place where lightning began, became, and remains a refrain for me and Brock even now as we try to puzzle out the current state of our lives. How we got here, if we are happy, and what we can do to control that which is so obviously bigger than us. We speak of it often, on the phone, late at night, the pattern of gold on a lake bottom, the clarity of the water, the stunned fish floating reverent below. Yet what I remember most is this. We were young. We were friends. We were fishing. We had unknowable futures before us, and had seen something on that day that no one else had seen. We were naive. We were unprepared. And though we had little money, we felt so tremendously grand, so thankful for what we had witnessed, for what it felt like we had somehow survived and could speak about, could even live on for a while if we had to, that when it came time to eat, we threw an extra steak on the grill for the dog. That's it. So I love the water, and I love fishing, and all that stuff. And we're so it's great to live here, right? I mean, we're surrounded by so much natural beauty. But I'm one of those people that, even though I think most people consider me an optimist, sort of frustratingly to them. My wife, I'm one of these people that wake up in like a really good mood. I just wake up and I'm like singing songs. Even my children who are supposed to be optimistic are like, "What are you doing? Like, what's wrong?" But even I cannot. I can't continue to deny what's happening to the climate, right? And especially Louisiana coast. And I've been so the next thing I'm going to read is very short. It's shorter than that. It's the beginning of a novel I've been working on. Actually, for a long time. I was talking to Katrina and a couple other writers the other night about like how long do novels exist before you actually start writing them, and all this. We were reading this Don DeLillo quote or something really snooty and intellectual, but it was like you do like you're working on a novel sort of constantly, even if you're not actually writing. You're sort of always doing this, and this is one that started to me like probably more than 15 years ago, right? The idea of this thing, and I've written other books since, but it's always in my head. I'm working on it now. And it's very different, but it's different for me. And so, like Liz was nervous. I'm nervous too because I've never really read anything like sort of in progress like this. So if it sucks, just don't tell me because I don't want to stop. I really want to finish this damn thing. So if it sucks, don't tell me. Anyway, this is a novel called L3K, and it sort of exists in like an indeterminate future type of thing in Louisiana. I'm just going to read chapter 1. Chapter 1. Here. The sound where there used to be land is of wind, and the smell is of oil and of gas and of eggs. The doctor's hair is bound tight to her head in a braid, and she sits alone near the rear of the boat, the hood of her paper hazmat pulled back to rest on her shoulders. Her mask is snug and secure, but is hot with her breath, and she must steady herself on the boat, though it does not move quickly. Still, it is her first time to cross this tainted water, and the gliding slip of the hull, the unmoored motion it creates inside of her, she does not care for. Hands on her lap, she leans forward and holds her breath. She looks down at her blue latex gloves, fingers gripped to her thighs, and wishes only to be elsewhere. Her guide is a man named Semino. He stands at the helm of this boat, which may have once been white but is now stained on the hull gray from use. He wears neither mask nor suit and is dressed instead in cargo shorts and rubber work boots. His shirt, short-sleeved and drenched in sweat, has the L3K logo on its breast. He is thick in the hips and bald and brown from the sun and is outwardly dismayed that this doctor is all they sent him after so many formal requests. He expected more people, he told her. A team, he'd said. Men, to be honest. The situation is not stable. The doctor looks up and is dizzy, feels her watch pulse. She lifts the elastic cuff of her sleeve. It is time for her pill. She pulls her travel bag up to her lap, a week's worth of clothes in there, the warm tube, toiletries, backup batteries, notebooks, a digital recorder. She finds the medicine card and unblisters the pill and swallows it in one practiced and joyless motion. Only 3 more days before she inserts the device and changes medications yet again, and so why, she wonders, did she have to be sent on this trip at this time to this sunken and devastated place? She resets the bag by her feet and sees on the floor of the boat a green metal box. It has moved closer to her with the rise and fall of the hull, and she has no idea what's inside of it. Large enough to be nautical flares, a first aid, but she watched Semino load it with care of the dock, and so it could be some type of clue, she knows, the evidence she was sent here to gather. She straightens her leg to tow at the box and turns it enough to see a handwritten label above the small latch. Frogs, it reads. Colorado River, 20. She makes a mental note to remember this fact as they are nowhere near Colorado, but instead boating over the place Louisiana once was and still is, perhaps, there beneath her. And when she thinks of this place that once was but is no longer, she believes that she can hear the low croaking of the frogs in the box. So many, she imagines, sounding out from their wide and fragile throats. The doctor stands up and tries to breathe deeply but cannot. The same awful smell at that height as below, sulfur and sludge through the mask. The many layers of heat. She holds on to the back of the captain's chair where Semino works at the wheel but says nothing. They've been riding at this slow pace for half an hour, and the tops of submerged buildings have given way to the heads of electrical towers, the wicked crowns of sharp and salted trees, and now in the distance, she believes she can see the place they are headed, the first habitat of L3K, a large black dome, a vast and unfocused horizon. At this sight, the doctor recalls that her name is Ella Powell. She's a psychologist. She reminds herself of these things as part of her self-care routine. Slow it down. Focus on what is in front of you. Her name is Ella Powell. She is a psychologist. She is on a boat. She is to complete an evaluation, and she is to report. She is to begin with a man named Flanagan, the keeper of pelicans. And what did she glean from brief notes? Confusing behaviors, abandoned his quarters to live in the trees. He and several others, she was told, becoming insubordinate. This is government land, she was reminded. She is a government employee. There is an obligation. Look for opportunities to cut costs, improve operations. She is to be quick and efficient as she is known to be. So what is she so afraid of? Semino lowers the throttle. The motor deepens and slows in a great gurgle of water and muck to bob the hull echo-like in its wake. Ella grips the chair with both hands. What is it, she says. Are we stopping? Semino takes a thin phone from his pocket. He nods at the black water ahead and aims the camera, hits record. The doctor sees nothing before him of note, just the rainbow sheen of the Gulf's oily surface, miles of thick and still gel. There, Semino says and points again. She now sees in the distance what he does, maybe 50 yards away, a broad and ovular swirl, an upheaval. And soon the water breaks into the shape of 2 backs. The first sign of life in this Gulf, and yet to Ella, a terror. The skin of these creatures as dark and thickly scaled as a snake, bodies tight as dolphins, yet she knows this is not what they are. A sink in her stomach as the glistening movement unsettles her, their slow progress, their endless and tubular arcs. She has seen neither head nor tail for too long. No puff of air, no dorsal fin, only the continuous shimmer of skin. What are they, she asked. I thought nothing could live in this water. They watch in troubled silence as the backs glide in long partnered stripes, shining. Nella cannot understand the physiology. Is it one creature or 2? She blinks her eyes to gain focus, and the shapes rise to braid themselves in a twist of black muscle and oil. The bodies coil and knot, and when fully wrenched, thrash wildly about the sea like one violent rope. Below the water, in a place she cannot fathom, some aching sound of their union, Ella believes. A low, mouthless wail, and they sink screaming as one to the deep. Semino returns the camera to his pocket, wipes his eye with the flat of his palm. Let's just get you there, he says. Of course, Ella says. In 5 days, you think. She only has to endure 5 days. Ella looks to the habitat in the distance, eyes wet from either wind or fear, and the place appears entirely and featureless to her in this blur. Possibly alone out there in the nothing. Yet this is her destination. Her name is Ella Powell. She is a psychologist. She is to be quick and efficient, and she is to be gone soon. She focuses only on what she knows to be true, and the sky above her bends in a bright gray lens. She then turns to sight the distant shoreline from which they departed, the solid land, the dependable thing, and has no way of knowing that she will never return. Anyway, that's chapter 1. I don't know. Anyway, thank y'all so much for coming out. Nikki and Michelle, thank you everybody, and obviously Liz and Christian, amazing. And thank y'all just for supporting the arts. How cool is that? Thank y'all.
Give it up one more time for Neil and all 3 of our readers. That's a really tall music hit. Okay, we are in a little bit of a time crunch, so I'm going to read through these things swiftly. On Thursday, our beautiful assistant Tori is passing out flyers for our Thursday event and our event on the 17th. So on Thursday, we have poetry and pie at Windowsill Pies. There will be pie, delicious pie. They're very good at making pie. Stacy Balkin and Anel Lopez will be reading. So continuing our love for the CWW community, Stacy is an instructor at UNO and she works in the English department. Anel's a student in CWW. Come see them on Thursday. 12-9, Unlikely Saints is having a reading at the ARB bookstore. I will be reading. Izzy Honored will be reading. Jonathan Pinson, Brianna Augustus will all be reading on Friday at the ARB bookstore. Also happening on Friday is Gold Room. Henry Goldkamp, who is here, will be reading at Zeitgeist Theater. Same with Laura Johnson, Julie Landry, Laura McKnight, and Jane Herter, continuing our love for the CWW. Splice is the next night. Splice is on Saturday, 12:10. Adam Clay and Ian Lockaby will be reading. That's at Saturn Bar. Check them out on social media if you are not already following them. And then on Sunday, oh my goodness, what a marathon. Michelle is leading an ekphrastic poetry workshop at 1 p.m. at the Sculpture Garden at City Park. So you can come, you can write poetry based off of art. It is free. All of our events are always free. Please come out. Follow us on social media if you do not. Liminal Lit. Drum roll, 12-17, 12 to 5. Our first annual Liminal Lit Fest will be happening. Almost everybody in this room is reading there. Henry will be there, Michelle will be there, I will be there, Rodrigo will be there. So many people, Liz will be there. Neil didn't respond to my email about it, but it's cool, we're still friends. We love you, thank you for being here tonight. If you'd like to join, let me know. But anyway, that will be at Zeitgeist as well. It's a new art park outside. We have like over 20 vendors and readers, and it's going to be a hell of a time. And lastly, our last event for December, 12/20, 7 to 9 p.m. on Zoom. We are having a hybrid workshop. CNF and poetry combined. That's the hybrid part. So please join us, 7 to 9 on Zoom on the 20th. Get your writing in before you get your family stuff in, I guess. All those things. All right. Most important announcement of the evening is Swing Dance happens now. If you are sitting at one of these tables and chairs, please just move them off the floor as quickly as possible. You don't even have to know where they go. I can help with that. Just move them off the floor. We love you. Thank you for being here. Buy Christy Lorio's book. Buy Neil's book. Neil, how do we buy your book? Books. Go to Neil's website. Google him. Liz, how do we buy your book? Also go to Liz's website. All right, we love you. We'll see you in January. Thank you for being here. Good night. Luke, I books.